There is a rule about money that certain families have quietly passed down for over 3,000 years. It involves the number 7. And when I tell you what it is, you are going to understand why some families build wealth that lasts for generations, while others work their entire lives and end up with almost nothing. Banks know about this pattern. Financial institutions have studied it, but nobody explains it to ordinary people. Today, I am going to change that. Let me ask you something honest. Have you ever looked at your bank account at the end of the month and wondered where it all went? You worked hard. You showed up every single day. You sacrificed time, rest, and health. And yet there is always more month left than money. Maybe you have tried budgeting. Maybe you have read the books. Maybe you have followed every piece of advice from every expert on your screen. And still, something feels off, like there is a leak somewhere in your financial life that you simply cannot find, no matter how hard you look. Here is what I want you to know. It is not your fault. You were never taught the real rules. The rules that actually govern how money works, how it grows, how it stays, and how it multiplies across generations. I want to tell you about a woman named Diane. She worked 2 jobs for almost 15 years, a nurse during the day, cleaning offices 3 nights a week. Diane was not lazy, she was not careless with money, but every single time she managed to save a little, something would happen. The car would break down, a medical bill would arrive, the roof needed repair. It felt like the money was running away from her no matter how fast she chased it. And meanwhile she would look around and see other families who did not seem to work any harder than she did, buying homes, sending their children to good schools, building something real. What did they know that she did not? That is the question most people never ask. And the ones who do ask it usually get the wrong answer. People say it is about luck, about connections, about having an unfair advantage. But that is not the whole truth. The deeper truth is that there are ancient principles about money, about cycles, about how wealth actually moves through time, that have been preserved in Jewish tradition for over 3,000 years. These principles are not magic, they are not superstition. They are practical, battle-tested wisdom that has survived empires, persecutions, exiles, and economic collapse after economic collapse. And at the heart of these principles is what I call the 777 rule. It is rooted in the Torah, confirmed by the Talmud. And when you truly understand it, the way you think about money will never be the same. Let me walk you through each of the 3 sevens, where they come from, and exactly how to apply them in your life starting this week. Not someday, this week. The first 7 is about the cycle of work and rest. And I need to tell you a story to explain why this matters far more than you think. My grandmother came to this country with almost nothing. 2 suitcases and a small amount of money sewn into the lining of her coat. She did not speak English well. She had no degree, no connections, no family in business. But within 10 years, she owned a small shop. Within 20 years, she owned the building the shop was in. And by the time she passed away, she had left behind enough to help every one of her grandchildren get started in life. When I was about 12 years old, I asked her how she did it. How do you build something from nothing? And she told me something I did not fully understand at the time, but have never forgotten. She said, "The secret is not in how hard you work. The secret is in when you stop." I thought she was joking. She was not. In the book of Exodus, God commands something that sounds simple on the surface. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work, but the 7th day is a Sabbath. Most people read that and think it is only a religious instruction. But my grandmother understood something deeper. She understood that the command to rest on the 7th day is not just spiritual, it is financial. Here is why. When you work 7 days a week without ever stopping, something happens to your mind. You lose perspective. You start making desperate decisions. You say yes to bad deals because you are too exhausted to see clearly. You spend money trying to comfort yourself from the burnout. You cannot spot opportunities because your mind is buried under fatigue. The Talmud teaches that a person's provision for the year is set between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, except for what is spent honoring the Sabbath, which is given separately. Think about what that means. The resources you set aside for sacred rest are not subtracted from your wealth. They are added on top of it. My grandmother took Shabbat seriously, not just as a spiritual discipline, but as a financial strategy. Every Friday evening she closed her shop. The other shop owners on her street stayed open and laughed at her. They said she was leaving money on the table. But because she rested, she thought more clearly during the 6 days she worked. She made better decisions about what to stock, what to charge, when to expand. She noticed things her competitors missed because their minds were too foggy from never stopping. The first 7 in this rule is this: work in cycles of 6 and 1. 6 days of focused, intentional effort. 1 day of complete rest. Not lazy rest, sacred rest. Rest where you step back, review your finances, think about your direction, and reconnect with what actually matters. If you are working 7 days a week right now, I am telling you with everything I have, you are not getting ahead. You are burning fuel without ever navigating. This one practice alone has protected more families from financial ruin than any investment strategy ever invented. But this is only the beginning. The second 7 is even more powerful, and almost nobody outside of Jewish tradition talks about it openly. The second 7 is about what Torah calls the Shemitah cycle. In the book of Deuteronomy, God commands something that sounds almost impossible to modern ears. At the end of every 7 years, you shall grant a release. Every creditor shall release what he has lent. Every 7 years, debts were forgiven. Loans were released. The financial slate was wiped clean. Banks definitely do not want you thinking about this principle, because the entire modern financial system is built on the opposite idea. They want you in debt forever. They want you making minimum payments for decades. They want you to believe that carrying debt is just normal life. But in Jewish tradition, debt was never meant to be permanent. It was meant to be cyclical. There was a man in our community, I will call him David, who came to speak at our synagogue about 15 years ago. David had been a successful real estate investor. Properties, income, a good reputation. Then 2008 arrived. By the time the dust settled, David was carrying over $2 million in debt across multiple properties. He could not sleep. His marriage was falling apart. He told us that one morning he sat in his car in the parking lot of his office and simply could not make himself go inside. He was completely paralyzed. That evening he went to speak with his rabbi, and the rabbi told him something unexpected. He said, "David, you are in your personal Shemitah year. This is not a punishment. This is a release." The rabbi explained that the Shemitah principle is not only about literally forgiving debts. It is about understanding that every 7 years you need to conduct a full audit of your financial life and release everything that is no longer working. The deals draining you, the investments losing money that you hold on to out of pride, the business relationships that cost more than they bring in, the subscriptions, memberships, and obligations that have piled up like barnacles on a ship, slowing you down without you even realizing it. David went home that night and made a list. Every financial commitment, every payment, every obligation, every deal. And for each one he asked himself a single question. If I were starting fresh today, would I enter into this again? Everything that got a no, he began the process of releasing. He sold 2 properties at a loss. He ended a business partnership that had been quietly draining him for years. He cancelled memberships he had been paying out of habit. It took 18 months. But at the end of that process, David was carrying almost no debt. His income was lower, yes, but his expenses were so much lower that for the first time in years he was actually keeping more than he spent. Within 5 years he had rebuilt his entire portfolio, this time with no debt at all. Here is your assignment for the second 7. This week, sit down with a piece of paper and write down every single financial obligation you carry, every debt, every subscription, every recurring charge, everything that takes money from you automatically. Then ask yourself David's question. If I were starting fresh, would I sign up for this again? Be honest. Be ruthless. Because the things you are holding on to out of fear or habit or wounded pride, those are the exact things keeping you from your next level. Now pay very close attention to what I am about to say, because this third 7 is the one that changes everything. The third 7 is about an ancient practice called masa, the tithe, but applied in a way most people have never heard of. And it comes from a pattern hidden in the story of Jacob in the book of Genesis. After his famous dream of the ladder reaching to heaven, Jacob makes a vow. He says, "Of all that you give me, I will surely give 1/10 to you." Most people know about tithing. Give 10%. That is common across many traditions. But here is what almost nobody talks about. Look at when Jacob made this vow. He made it at a moment of total uncertainty. He was running for his life. He had no home, no wealth, nothing. He was sleeping on the ground with a stone for a pillow. And in that moment of absolute nothing, he promised to give away 10% of everything he would ever receive. This is the third 7, and it connects to the number 7 because of how it was practiced in ancient Israel. Every 7th year during the Shemitah, there was a special tithe redistributed not just to the temple, but to the poor, the stranger, the widow, the orphan. Giving was not charity in the optional sense. It was justice. It was the righteous order of how money was supposed to move. But here is the part that changes everything. It is not just about giving 10%. It is about giving it first. Before you pay rent, before you pay bills, before you do anything else. The first portion goes to tzedakah, which we translate as charity, but which actually comes from the Hebrew word tzedek, meaning righteousness. Giving is not generosity in Jewish thought. It is the correct order of things. I knew a woman named Ruth who lived in my neighborhood when I was raising my children. A widow. Her husband had left her with very little, a small pension, some savings. Everyone worried about her. The rabbi's wife used to bring her food on Fridays. But Ruth did something that confused people. Every single month, without fail, Ruth gave to tzedakah. Not a lot, sometimes just $20, sometimes $50. And people would tell her, "Ruth, you cannot afford to give. Keep that for yourself." And Ruth would say something I still carry with me today. She would say, "I cannot afford not to give. When I give, I am telling God that I trust Him to provide, and He has never broken that promise to me." Ruth lived to be 93 years old. She never went hungry. She never lost her home. And when she passed away, they discovered that her small savings had grown steadily over the decades because she had invested wisely, lived simply, and never once stopped giving. The Talmud states something that still gives me chills. It says, "Tithe so that you will become wealthy." The rabbis were not speaking in metaphors. They were stating a financial principle that has been tested across thousands of years. Here is what I want you to do. Starting with your very next paycheck, take 7%. Yes, 7, because this is the 777 rule. Set it aside for giving before you pay anything else. I know your mind is already listing every reason why you cannot do this. But remember Jacob. He made his vow sleeping on a rock with nothing to his name, and he became one of the most prosperous men in the ancient world, the father of 12 tribes, the patriarch of a nation. Start with 7%. Give it to someone who needs it, to a cause that matters to your community, and watch what happens over the next 7 months. You will not believe the doors that begin to open. Now let me bring all 3 of these together, because when you see how they connect, the real power of this teaching becomes clear. The first 7 says rest every 7th day, so your mind stays sharp, your decisions stay wise, and your work stays focused rather than frantic. The second 7 says every 7th cycle, whether that is 7 months or 7 years, review everything, release what is not working, and enter your next season without the weight of dead obligations dragging you backwards. The third 7 says give 7% of everything you receive before you do anything else, and you open a channel of blessing that no bank, no recession, and no economic crisis can close. Rest, release, give. This is not just a financial strategy. This is the rhythm of creation itself. God created the world in 6 days and rested on the 7th. The land of Israel was worked for 6 years and rested on the 7th. The wealth that flows into your life needs the same rhythm. It needs space. It needs release. It needs circulation. Money you grip tightly eventually suffocates. Money you manage wisely, release regularly, and circulate generously grows in ways that defy ordinary logic. I have watched families in this community practice these 3 principles for decades, and I can tell you with absolute certainty that the families who rest, who regularly audit and release, and who give before they spend, those families prosper. Not just financially, their relationships are stronger, their health is better, their children grow up with a sense of security and generosity that carries forward into the next generation. This is what generational wealth truly means. It is not just the money you leave behind, it is the wisdom you pass down. And right now, in this moment, you are receiving wisdom that has sustained an entire people through every kind of hardship the world has thrown at them. Your season of struggle does not have to continue. The pattern can change. But it requires you to stop doing what everyone else is doing and start following a different rhythm. The rhythm of 7. If this touched something inside you today, I want you to do 2 things. First, write the words, "I choose the rhythm of 7" in the comments below. When you write it down, when you declare it, something shifts. It becomes real. Second, think of one person in your life who works hard but cannot seem to get ahead. Share this with them. You might be the one who changes everything for them. Sometimes one piece of wisdom at the right moment can redirect the course of an entire life. The same God who shielded Abraham, who prospered Jacob, who sustained Ruth through every hard season, sees you right now. Trust the rhythm. Rest, release, give, and watch what he does next.